Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I'm just sitting here drinking my morning coffee, getting ready to get my day started, getting ready to get breakfast, squat, all of that. And I'm still getting tons of questions, even though I've undertaken this style of training. I'm getting so many questions from people saying, I don't understand how it's possible that doing heavy singles every single day could get you bigger. I can see how that could make someone stronger, but shouldn't you even be doing more volume to get stronger? And how's a person going to get bigger doing this? And the interesting thing is, and I want people to understand, I'm absolutely not saying this is the only way to train. I'm not saying that this is even the best way to train for everybody. Because the problem with it is not that it doesn't work. The problem is that it's very physically and psychologically demanding to train this way. And again, that's the funny thing, that people who say otherwise have never undertaken it. That's the funny thing. When you see people say that, you'll see other people who've done this style of training in the comments are like, no, try it for a month and then come back and say how easy it is. It really isn't. And I'm doing it because YouTube is a full-time gig for me. It's a full-time gig at this point. I have the training and recovery time to do this as much as I want. So again, it's not a big deal for me to come in and do this with 4 or 5 different exercises every single day. Not a big deal. I have the recovery time, the downtime. I spend a lot of time laying on my couch reading just to relax between all of this, just to bring my stress levels down and recover everything else. So the thing is, people will say that, but then you can use me as an example, or you can use all the other people out there if you observe the people who do this, because they're better examples. They're way better examples than me. But the thing is, guys, people have noted I've gotten bigger this year. That I've gotten bigger. Again, I've regained a lot of my old muscle. Not at the biggest I've ever been, but I am bigger. Yet I was doing low sets even late last year. Remember, I switched over to exclusively 3-rep sets late last year. I gained muscle doing that, and the evidence is there for that. High volume triples, we know, will put size on you. That's not even debated in the scientific world anymore. But I did that, and then early this year, I switched over to the pure Bulgarian style training, or at least powerlifting type versions of Bulgarian. I've continued to get bigger. People have noted it. Not dramatically bigger, but I've gained size. Yet I only do, for the most part, 1-rep sets. A few of my accessories here and there, I do triples and things. I don't go higher than that. I really don't. Yet I'm making gains. But people want to see, I don't see how it could work. Well, just because you don't understand how something could work doesn't mean that it can't work, and it doesn't mean that it hasn't been proven over time. And when you look at a lot of the lifters who do this, what do you notice? There are tons of guys who do this style of training who are very jacked and very strong, who do it long term. If you'll say, well, it's a peaking program. No, I mean, you can do it to peak, but there are people who do this for years on end who continue to get more jacked. They're strong. A lot of them are brutally strong who do variations of this style of training. It works. And the reason people get caught up in this mindset is because the bodybuilding world has taught them that you have to have tons of volume and reps and everything else to get big. And there's this disconnect in people's minds between size and strength. But when you think about it, people get bigger due to tension, due to fatigue, things like that in their muscle mass. When you start looking at a lot of these big lifts, when you train them as explosively as you can, what do we know from the data? The more explosively you lift, the more muscle fibers you recruit, even on the same exercise, same weight. If you're training like this with nothing but very big exercises that recruit muscles through the entire body, a lot of them have a systematic load. I mean, squats, deadlifts, standing presses, and a lot of the lifts that people would do with this sort of training, they stress your entire body. And when you think about it from that perspective, when you're lifting very heavy weights, you get an enormous radiant effect through the entire body, particularly when you're handling heavier weights, more so than just sometimes when you're doing lighter weight with more reps. You're getting a strong radiant effect because you have to brace your core harder, you have to grip things harder, everything else, because you're dealing with heavier weights. That creates, over the course of your sets through the week, a lot of muscles getting a lot of secondary stress through your entire body. I mean, realistically, when you look at a deadlift, that's a perfect example. It does work every muscle in the body. There isn't a single muscle in the body that isn't involved with some portion of the deadlift. I'm not saying it's going to cause great amounts of growth in every one of them, but think of that as an example. When you really look at the biomechanics of it and the bracing and everything involved, it requires you, particularly when you drop the straps, particularly that case, it works the entire body. But when we start looking at all these big lifts, You need to understand that you're getting maximal muscle fiber recruitment through those muscles on that one set. You're doing it over and over. When you start looking in terms of the weekly workload, again, when you start hitting 90% of one rep max or higher, that rep recruits virtually every muscle fiber through every muscle involved. Particularly if you lift it fast and explosive, every single muscle involved as a primary mover, it recruits all the available motor units. If you're doing that 6 or 7 times a week on that exercise, and you're doing it with a variety of exercises, those muscles are getting a large amount of muscle fiber recruitment. And you need to remember the upper threshold fibers, which have enormous potential for growth, whereas remember, your stamina-oriented fibers can't really grow very much. They have a very, very mild contribution to overall muscle size due to them growing. They don't grow particularly well. When you look at it from that perspective, it is possible to gain an enormous amount of muscle over time doing this. It's because you are hitting all of these upper threshold fibers every day. And if almost every muscle in your body, because you're doing enough variety of exercises, is getting the upper threshold muscle fibers fatigued enough to get a training response, which will happen when you go to 90% and higher of your 1 rep max, you're doing it day in, day out. And let's say you're doing 3 different exercises, 4 different exercises. Every single muscle in your body, for the most part, with maybe some exceptions, is getting its upper threshold fibers hit at least once to a training effect every single day. Of course you're going to get bigger. And particularly if there's progressive overload, you've got to remember there's already an accumulation of fatigue from that mounts over the weeks. It's not just about any one session. It is just that continual fatiguing of those muscles every single day. You look at that over time at the fatigue that creates. It's going to create a training response. You're going to get bigger. And particularly if you add weight to the bar over time, the progressive overload is there. And people are so caught up in volume in the terms of total tonnage move, and I'm not saying that doesn't matter, but realistically speaking, guys, you know that on a 10 rep set, the first 5 reps don't stimulate anything. They don't stimulate anything. It's only the later reps when you're doing this rep work that actually cause any training response. So when we think of it from those terms, in terms of that volume, it starts to make sense that really the only volume that counts are usually the final few reps, even in a high rep set. So that's the only volume that really has any muscle stimulating effect. That earlier fatigue that you're inducing is just to get to those higher threshold fibers so that you get through the ones that are capable of minimal, if any, muscle growth from resistance training. So that volume that you're getting isn't as much volume as you think it is. Again, coming in and doing 5 sets of 10 when realistically only 3 reps out of each set actually contributed to your muscle growth. Let's say you do that with 300 pounds and then you move that down and realize at 5 sets, only 15 of those reps of 300 pounds actually contributed at all to your muscle growth, to that total tonnage of that ultra high volume like that. And you're not going to be able to do that multiple times a week probably, right? 5 sets of 10 on any exercise with fatigue, you're not going to be able to do that 3-4 days a week. You might be doing that once, you might be doing that twice. Then you go back and compare that to hitting a single every day. Because if you can do that, you can probably hit 500 pounds on that lift for a single. Well, you're doing that 7 days a week, and you've now gotten 7 reps with a much higher weight. So when you look at it from the amount of tonnage that is actually contributing to muscle growth, it's pretty similar. And but people need to get this mindset out of their head that lifting really, really heavy weight doesn't cause you to get bigger. That's just simply not true. It's an absurd concept that people have become so detached because of all the pump and volume training that bodybuilders have done over the years that they've become completely detached from common sense that everyone has known all throughout history. When they see a big muscular guy, they think that guy's strong, he can lift a lot of weight, right? We know that instinctively as a species when we see that. We don't need to be taught that usually even. That's just an observation. We've known that for all of human history. A guy with big muscles is strong, right? Yet we've become completely detached from that to the idea that maximum strength training doesn't make you bigger and only large amounts of volume with light weight makes you bigger. Then it can make you bigger, and it does make you bigger when applied correctly. But to the idea that that is the only way to get massive or to get really big is just absurd. It's just simply not true. It goes against common sense. It goes against human biology. It goes against what's been observed in the lifting world for people who actually do lift extremely heavy day in and day out. It just doesn't match. We have this complete disconnect that the whole bodybuilding world has created that makes us actually turn off our common sense and our normal instinct of what we know. It's amazing how this works. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.